The world of royalty thrives on tradition, ceremony, and the kind of predictability that reassures both the institution and the people who follow it. Every move is carefully calculated, every announcement rehearsed, every change of order signed and sealed within the rigid framework of centuries-old custom. That is why when something happens that breaks that carefully protected mold, it does not just make news. It shakes the very ground on which the monarchy stands. This is exactly what happened when King Charles made the unthinkable choice to name Princess and as his official successor. It was not whispered behind closed doors. It was not left to speculation. It was not an accidental leak. It was a statement so direct, so deliberate, and so immediate that the world barely had time to catch its breath. In a matter of minutes, headlines flashed across screens, social media erupted, and households across Britain and beyond were left asking the same haunting question: why her and why now? The opening shock was more than enough to stir controversy, but it was the timing that added fuel to the fire. 1 minute ago, the monarchy seemed to stand firmly in its familiar line of succession. Prince William, the eldest son of Charles and heir apparent, was poised to inherit the crown, continuing the direct bloodline that stretches back through centuries of kings and queens. The institution had weathered scandals, divorces, exiles, and abdications, but never had it openly rewritten the natural order in this way. Charles's decision was not simply about succession. It was a declaration that loyalty, resilience, and service could outweigh birthright. That message alone carried consequences that could unravel unity within his family and throw the monarchy into one of the greatest storms it has faced in modern times. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The beginning of this story lies not in the sudden announcement, but in the undercurrents that have long been stirring within the royal household. Princess Anne, the only daughter of Queen Elizabeth II, has often been described as the quiet engine of the monarchy. She is rarely the one to grab front-page headlines, rarely the one caught in scandal, and rarely the one given credit for holding things together. Yet, those who have studied her career know she has consistently been the hardest-working royal, carrying out hundreds of engagements each year without fanfare. While her brothers often found themselves tangled in controversy or distracted by the weight of expectation, and built a reputation for steadiness, humility, and tireless dedication. The irony is that the very qualities that made her seem peripheral may have positioned her at the center of this extraordinary decision. For years, whispers circulated that King Charles valued Anne's loyalty more than anyone else's. Through divorces, public embarrassments, and the cracks that appeared in the Windsor family image, Anne never wavered. She stood by her mother during Elizabeth's reign, handled her role without complaint, and rarely indulged the privileges that often poisoned other royals' reputations. To many inside the palace, she was the model of what royalty should represent: duty above personal desire, service above self-promotion. And now, it seems Charles has elevated that principle above the established line of inheritance. But was this decision driven by wisdom, desperation, or something darker lurking behind palace walls? As the announcement spread, the middle chapter of this drama unfolded rapidly. Royal watchers began debating constitutional questions, political figures called for clarity, and loyalists of William and Harry voiced outrage. In an institution built upon continuity, this choice opened the door to accusations of instability. Could Charles legally name and his successor, or was this symbolic defiance of tradition that would collapse under scrutiny? The weight of British constitutional law suddenly fell into the public eye, raising questions about whether the monarch has the authority to bypass the natural heir, or if this was merely a symbolic proclamation designed to spark conversation about the future of the crown. Either way, the optics were undeniable. Charles had chosen to publicly align himself with his sister rather than his son. That choice reverberated beyond palace corridors, sparking debates across dinner tables, talk shows, and parliaments. But to understand the deeper meaning of this move, one has to explore the fractures in the House of Windsor that have quietly widened over the years. The strained relationship between Charles and William, though often painted as cordial, has always carried an undertone of tension. William, groomed for the throne since birth, has lived under the shadow of expectation and the burden of perfection. He embodies the future of the monarchy in the eyes of many, modern enough to appeal to a younger generation, yet traditional enough to reassure conservatives. Yet, Charles's decision signals either a lack of confidence in William's readiness or a fear that William's reign could accelerate the erosion of the monarchy at a time when it needs stabilizing. And in that moment of doubt, Charles looked to the one figure who has never failed him, his sister. The middle of this narrative also belongs to the global reaction. Within hours, foreign press outlets framed the announcement as a seismic departure from tradition. Commentators in America questioned whether Charles was motivated by his fractured relationship with Harry and Meghan, suggesting this move was a way to sideline both sons at once. Australian broadcasters drew parallels to Elizabeth's steady reign, contrasting her disciplined daughter with Charles's sometimes turbulent record. Across Commonwealth nations, the announcement prompted reflection on their ties to the crown. Would Anne's succession strengthen or weaken their loyalty? Each reaction layered onto the drama, transforming a private family matter into an international conversation about the monarchy's survival. In the end, the introduction to this saga closes not with answers, but with questions that pierce through the heart of royalty itself. Why did Charles choose now, after decades of tradition pointing toward William? What secret conversations, what hidden fears, what moments of doubt pushed him toward Anne? And perhaps most hauntingly, what will this mean for the future of the monarchy? Is this the beginning of a bold new era, or the spark that ignites its collapse? The answers lie ahead, but for now, the stage is set. A king has named his sister, a brother has been bypassed, and a family already fractured stands on the edge of something far greater than scandal. It is nothing less than the rewriting of royal destiny, and its consequences will be felt not just in Buckingham Palace, but in the hearts of millions who wonder whether the crown can withstand such a storm. The shock of King Charles naming Princess Anne as his official successor was not just a headline. It was an earthquake. To grasp its magnitude, one must pause and consider what the monarchy is built upon: continuity, stability, and predictability. The British monarchy does not run like a corporation where leadership changes hands at the whim of a board. It is structured on the oldest and simplest principle: inheritance flows through bloodlines. From the moment of William's birth, the world assumed that one day he would become king. He was groomed for it, trained for it, and photographed through every stage of his life with that destiny in mind. The idea of anyone stepping ahead of him was unthinkable until now. And in choosing Anne, Charles didn't just move a piece on the chessboard. He overturned the board entirely. To many, this decision represented both wisdom and betrayal, and therein lies the heart of its power. Wisdom, because Princess Anne's record is unimpeachable. She is known for her no-nonsense approach, her hard work, and her devotion to duty. For decades, she has been the backbone of the royal family, often overlooked but never faltering. She attends more public engagements each year than any other royal, often without fanfare, and rarely seeks attention. If the monarchy is to survive in an era where scandals and criticisms have battered its image, then perhaps steadiness is exactly what is needed. But betrayal, because this move strips William of the role he was born to fulfill. The symbolism of a father choosing his sister over his son is brutal, and its emotional consequences are difficult to overstate. A father bypassing his son in favor of his sibling cuts deep not just into royal protocol, but into human pride and identity. It suggests doubt, mistrust, or disapproval of William, and it plants seeds of resentment that could poison the family from within. As the news traveled from Buckingham Palace to the streets of London and beyond, the reactions told their own story. Outside the gates, loyalists and tourists alike gasped when they heard. Some expressed admiration, saying Anne had always been their favorite. Others muttered about betrayal of tradition, arguing that Charles had no right to disrupt the natural order. Television hosts debated feverishly, historians were summoned for emergency interviews, and legal scholars began combing through centuries of precedent to determine if such a move could even stand. The monarchy, usually slow and measured in its adjustments, had been thrown into chaos within a single minute. And that chaos did not remain within Britain. It spread like wildfire across the Commonwealth, sparking new questions about loyalty to a crown that seemed suddenly unstable. The human heart of this drama lies in the unspoken emotions of those directly affected. Imagine Prince William at the moment he learned of this decision. For his entire life, he has carried the weight of his future crown. Every choice he made, every public appearance, every lesson taught by his grandmother and his father was filtered through that lens. One day, you will be king. Now, in a single breath, that certainty has been stripped away. Whether William received private warning or learned through the announcement itself hardly matters. The emotional devastation is the same. How does a man who has lived his entire life as heir apparent process being publicly set aside? How does he explain it to his children, who have been raised to believe they too carry the destiny of the monarchy in their blood? That is the wound inflicted not just upon William, but upon the entire line of succession. And what of Harry, already estranged and battered by his choices? For him, the announcement may feel like both vindication and humiliation. Vindication, because Charles's choice demonstrates that blood alone does not guarantee the throne. Humiliation, because once again he stands on the sidelines, watching decisions reshape the monarchy without him. Some may argue that Harry's exit with Meghan Markle paved the way for Anne's elevation. If Charles could not trust his sons to carry the monarchy forward without scandal, then who else, and could he rely on? Harry, perhaps more than anyone, will sense the deeper meaning of this move, and it will cut sharply, reigniting resentments that have long festered. The middle portion of this introduction must also address the gravity of tradition. The monarchy has withstood wars, abdications, and scandals precisely because it followed clear rules of succession. Elizabeth became queen not because her father favored her over another, but because her place in the bloodline demanded it. Even when Edward VIII abdicated, he did so within the rules, passing the crown to his brother rather than rewriting the natural order. Charles's move feels different. It feels personal, almost like a public judgment of his children. That is why it resonates so strongly, because it is not just about insuitability. It is about Charles openly declaring doubt in the very heirs the world has expected to follow him. As this realization spread, the palace itself became a stage for speculation. Whispers of tension between Charles and William have existed for years. Some insiders describe William as increasingly assertive, eager to modernize the monarchy in his own image. Charles, who waited decades to finally ascend the throne, may see that eagerness as impatience, as a threat to the stability of his reign. Was this decision then a message, a reminder that Charles still holds power, even over his son's destiny? Others speculate about Camilla's role. Her influence over Charles is undeniable, and some argue that her complicated relationship with William has soured the trust between father and son. If Camilla whispered in Charles's ear, did she frame, and as the safer choice, the loyal sibling who would not undermine him even after he is gone? And then there is Anne herself. The woman at the center of this storm has never sought the throne. She has often dismissed questions about her royal role with practicality, saying she simply does her duty. Yet perhaps it is precisely that reluctance that makes her appealing. Unlike others, she has not chased titles, not sought attention, not used the monarchy for personal gain. Charles's decision may have been less about her desire to rule and more about her example. By naming Anne, he sends a message. The crown belongs to those who serve it, not those who merely inherit it. But that principle comes at a cost, and it is that cost which will define the next chapters of this story. The closing moments of this introduction leave us standing at the edge of a storm without resolution. The world has heard the announcement. The reactions are pouring in, and the royal family itself is thrown into turmoil. Yet nothing is settled. Can Charles's decision even hold legal weight, or is it destined to be contested? Will William rise in defiance, or retreat into silence? Will Anne accept the role thrust upon her, or resist the spotlight she has long avoided? And what of the monarchy itself? Can it survive this open challenge to tradition, or will this fracture be the one that finally breaks it? These are the questions that hang in the air, unanswered but pressing. For 1 minute ago, the monarchy was stable, predictable, and unshaken. Now, it stands on the precipice of its greatest reckoning. The air was thick with routine on the morning the announcement came. News outlets prepared for the usual coverage of royal engagements. Politicians carried on with their arguments, and the British public settled into the familiar rhythm of everyday life. Yet in the span of a single minute, everything changed. Buckingham Palace released a statement that would reverberate across the globe. King Charles had formally named his sister, Princess Anne, as his official successor. The words themselves seemed simple enough, but the meaning they carried was a thunderclap that shattered the traditions of centuries. For the monarchy, for the family, and for the nation, it was as if the ground had shifted beneath their feet. The heir apparent was no longer the heir. The way the news broke only intensified the shock. Unlike past royal announcements, which were often preceded by whispers in the press or leaks from unnamed palace sources, this one arrived without warning. Reporters did not have time to prepare lengthy features or polished commentaries. They read the words live as they appeared, stumbling through sentences, their voices betraying disbelief. King Charles III has named Princess Anne as his official successor. One anchor read slowly, as if making sure the words on the teleprompter were not a mistake. Cameras cut to panels of experts, their faces frozen with confusion. Phones rang off the hook in newsrooms as producers scrambled to book constitutional scholars and historians. Within minutes, hashtags related to the announcement dominated social media across the globe. Ordinary citizens reacted with a mixture of awe, anger, and admiration. For some, the decision was a refreshing burst of honesty, proof that Charles was willing to prioritize service and loyalty over birthright. They flooded forums and comment sections with praise for Anne, celebrating her years of quiet devotion. For others, it was nothing less than treason against tradition. They accused Charles of undermining the monarchy, of humiliating his son, and of opening the door to chaos. In pubs, offices, and living rooms, debates erupted with a passion that rivaled discussions of football or politics. Every generation seemed to take a different side. Older monarchists clung to the sanctity of lineage, while younger Britons saw in Anne's elevation a long overdue break from patriarchal rules. The announcement's language was carefully crafted, yet every word carried weight. It described Anne as the trusted foundation of the monarchy and credited her decades of unbroken service. It spoke of her proven record of loyalty, humility, and resilience, contrasting qualities that, though not explicitly named, seemed to cast shadows over others in the royal family. Those who studied the statement noted its deliberate emphasis on duty over inheritance, as though Charles was trying to reshape the monarchy's very identity. The statement was short, but its implications stretched far beyond the page. The immediate reaction from the royal household was silence, a silence that spoke volumes. No comment came from Prince William, no word from Kensington Palace, no statement from Harry in California. The silence itself became a headline. Analysts speculated that William must have been blindsided, that he could not yet bring himself to respond. Others suggested that perhaps he had known but had chosen not to engage in the spectacle of public outrage. Either way, the absence of his voice in those first critical hours only magnified the sense of betrayal felt by many on his behalf. The streets around Buckingham Palace soon became a stage for the public's emotions. Crowds gathered, holding signs both in protest and support. One read, "And for Queen, duty above all," while another demanded, "Respect the line. William is the heir." Tourists, confused at first, found themselves swept into the energy of the crowd, filming the growing demonstrations on their phones. Police maintained order, but even they seemed captivated by the enormity of what had just been declared. For every cheer, there was a groan. For every clap, a shake of the head. Parliament, too, could not remain silent. Within hours, members from across the political spectrum demanded clarity. Was Charles's announcement legally binding? Did he possess the authority to override the Act of Settlement and centuries of established precedent? Legal experts debated in urgent interviews. Some argued that the monarch held symbolic power but no constitutional ability to alter succession. Others suggested that his statement carried political weight that Parliament could not simply dismiss. The debate was not merely academic. It struck at the very core of Britain's identity. Is the monarchy bound by unbreakable tradition, or can it adapt under the hand of a reigning king? Meanwhile, in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, the announcement triggered new dimensions of debate. In places where Republican sentiment already lingered, Some seized the decision as evidence that the monarchy was a fragile institution, ruled more by whim than law. In Commonwealth nations, from Canada to Australia, the news was greeted with equal parts curiosity and apprehension. Could Anne, with her understated style and no-nonsense approach, win hearts abroad where Charles and William had struggled? Or would this shift further alienate countries already questioning their ties to the crown? The announcement was no longer a domestic affair. It had become a global conversation about monarchy itself. The media frenzy intensified with every passing hour. Journalists dug into Anne's past, replaying footage of her engagements, her speeches, even her youthful scandals. Clips of her stoic demeanor during Queen Elizabeth's funeral resurfaced, framed now as evidence of her readiness for leadership. Opinion pieces multiplied, some hailing her as the rightful successor, others condemning the move as undemocratic and destructive. One newspaper carried the headline, "And the People's Queen," while another declared, "William betrayed. Charles breaks the crown." For those closest to the monarchy, the emotional impact was far heavier than the public could see. Palace staff reportedly described an atmosphere of tension and disbelief. Some spoke of hushed arguments in corridors, others of aides struggling to answer calls from furious supporters of William. The suddenness of the announcement left even seasoned courtiers reeling. This was not how the monarchy was supposed to operate. It was supposed to be measured, deliberate, and restrained. Instead, it felt impulsive, personal, almost reckless. The shockwaves even reached classrooms, where teachers found themselves fielding questions from children who had grown up seeing William as the future king. "Does this mean George won't be king?" one child asked, echoing the uncertainty of millions. The announcement had not only upended politics and media, but had unsettled the imagination of the next generation. For decades, William's face had symbolized the future of the monarchy. Now that image had been shaken, replaced with confusion about what tomorrow might look like. The announcement also unearthed historical memories long buried. Commentators drew comparisons to Edward VIII's abdication, to moments when the natural line of succession had been altered. Yet those past events carried different circumstances. Abdication was a choice made by the heir himself. Charles's decision to elevate his sister was a unilateral act, one that carried echoes of favoritism and mistrust. It was not simply history repeating itself, it was history being rewritten in a way no one had expected. As the hours stretched into evening, the nation remained glued to screens, waiting for reactions from the key players. When William finally appeared briefly in public, his silence was deafening. He smiled stiffly, answered no questions, and retreated quickly. That single appearance fueled even more speculation. Was he devastated? Was he furious? Was he planning to challenge the decision behind closed doors? Every second of his body language was dissected by experts desperate to decode his state of mind. And, by contrast, carried on with her scheduled engagement that day, visiting a rural charity she had long supported. Cameras swarmed her, reporters shouted questions, but she remained focused on the event. Her silence, too, became a statement, one that fit her reputation. She did not play into spectacle. Whether she accepted the role with pride or reluctance remained unclear, but her composure in the face of chaos only deepened the image of her as the steady hand of the monarchy. By the end of that first day, one fact was clear. The monarchy had been thrust into uncharted territory. No longer was succession a foregone conclusion. No longer could tradition alone silence debate. Charles's words had set off a chain of consequences that would shape the monarchy's future in ways still impossible to predict. The announcement had not just shaken the nation. It had cracked open the very foundation of what it meant to be royal. And in that crack lay both opportunity and danger. This was only the beginning. The days ahead would reveal hidden motives, secret conversations, and emotional battles that would test not only the royal family, but the institution itself. The announcement that shook the nation was not the end of the story. It was the spark that ignited a firestorm. History hangs heavily over every decision made by the monarchy, and none more so than the question of succession. The British crown is not simply a symbol. It is a thread woven through centuries of triumphs, failures, sacrifices, and betrayals. To grasp why Charles's announcement was so earth-shaking, one must look back at the centuries of tradition it defied. Succession has always been more than a matter of blood. It is the lifeline of legitimacy. When Charles chose to name his sister and as his official successor, he did not just change the future. He challenged the entire story that had been told about the monarchy since its very beginnings. From the moment William the Conqueror established his dynasty in 1066, the English crown passed down through eldest sons whenever possible. It was a pattern that reinforced the monarchy's claim to stability. Fathers beget sons, who beget more sons, ensuring an unbroken line stretching toward the future. When sons were lacking, daughters ascended, as with Mary I and Elizabeth I, but always with a sense of necessity rather than choice. To name a younger sibling in the presence of a living son would have been unthinkable, a violation of both bloodline and divine order. The monarchy is not a democracy where rulers can be voted in or out. Its strength comes from the fact that the next ruler is always known, always predetermined, untouched by whim. By inserting an into that order, Charles disturbed the very foundation of that certainty. The monarchy has endured precisely because it presents itself as timeless. Wars have been fought, empires lost, governments toppled, yet through it all, the crown endured. At the heart of that endurance lay succession. Even during moments of turmoil, the beheading of Charles I, the abdication of Edward VIII, the scandal of Prince Andrew, the public knew who would come next. That knowledge served as an anchor in stormy seas. The monarchy was not just about the present ruler, but about the promise of continuity. Charles's decision effectively unmoored that anchor. For the first time in modern memory, the nation faced the possibility that succession was not predetermined, but negotiable. And if succession could be altered once, what would prevent it from being altered again? The weight of history makes this decision feel not only shocking but dangerous. Generations of Britons grew up understanding that William would follow Charles, and George would follow William. Schoolchildren memorized the line of succession in order, just as their parents had. The images of the three generations, Charles, William, and George, standing together were meant to symbolize the monarchy's stability for the next century. By naming and, Charles erased that symbolic continuity. He replaced a carefully cultivated narrative with one of rupture, and history tells us that ruptures rarely pass quietly. Every time the natural line of succession has been broken, it has led to crisis. Consider the Wars of the Roses, born out of disputes over who had the better claim to the throne. Consider the Glorious Revolution of 1688, when James II's Catholic faith clashed with Protestant expectations, leading to his overthrow. These are not small precedents. They are reminders that meddling with succession has the potential to unleash forces far greater than the monarchy can control. Even Queen Elizabeth II's reign is framed by the weight of history. She was never supposed to be queen until her uncle abdicated, pushing her father to the throne. That single deviation from the natural line altered the monarchy forever. Elizabeth carried the memory of that disruption throughout her reign, using it to reinforce the importance of duty and continuity. She often emphasized that her role was not chosen but inherited, a role she accepted because it was her destiny. That sense of inevitability became her greatest strength. Charles, however, has broken from that philosophy. By choosing Anne, he has introduced choice into an institution that survives precisely because it denies choice. But why would Charles risk such a break? The answer, perhaps, lies in his understanding of history itself. Charles lived through the long shadow of his mother's reign, always aware of how history judged monarchs. His own path to the throne was marked by impatience and controversy. For decades, he was ridiculed as the eternal heir, the man who would never be king. When he finally ascended, he inherited not just the throne but the burden of preserving an institution many considered outdated. In such a context, naming and could be seen as an attempt to rewrite history, to demonstrate that the monarchy could adapt in ways it never had before. Where others clung to bloodline, Charles embraced loyalty. Where others upheld inevitability, Charles asserted choice. In his mind, perhaps, this was not a betrayal of history but an evolution of it. Yet history is not so easily reshaped. For William, the weight of tradition was not an abstract concept but a personal destiny. From the moment he was old enough to stand beside his grandmother on palace balconies, the narrative was clear. One day, you will be king. His education, his career, his marriage, even his children were all framed within that destiny. It was not simply his right, it was his responsibility. When Charles named, and he did not just pass over his son, he erased the culmination of decades of preparation. William, who had lived under the crushing weight of expectation, suddenly found that history had betrayed him. That betrayal echoes through history itself, for never has an heir so well-prepared been so abruptly displaced. Anne's place in history is no less remarkable. As the only daughter of Elizabeth II, she grew up in a world where her brother's destinies mattered more than her own. She was admired for her work ethic, respected for her blunt honesty, but she was never considered a contender for the throne. Yet history has a way of elevating those least expected. Elizabeth I was never meant to rule, yet she became one of Britain's greatest monarchs. Victoria inherited unexpectedly and oversaw an empire. Perhaps Charles sees in another unexpected figure who could defy expectations. In that sense, his choice aligns with history's pattern of unlikely rulers rising to greatness. But for every Elizabeth I, there is also a reminder of the chaos such shifts create. Unpredictable successions do not always end in glory. They often end in bloodshed, division, or collapse. The symbolism of Charles bypassing William cannot be overstated when viewed through the lens of history. Fathers have passed crowns to sons for generations, often reluctantly, but inevitably. To choose a sister over a son is to break that lineage, and in doing so, Charles invites comparison with monarchs who meddled in succession to disastrous effect. Henry VIII, desperate for a male heir, tore his country apart in pursuit of his will. James II, refusing to bend, lost his crown and fled into exile. History has always punished monarchs who defy the natural order. The question now is whether Charles will suffer the same fate, or whether his gamble will succeed in reshaping the monarchy for a modern age. What makes the weight of history so suffocating in this moment is not simply the past, but the future it shapes. The monarchy is not a relic preserved in glass. It lives through the faith of the people, through their belief that it represents something larger than individuals. By disrupting succession, Charles has placed that faith in jeopardy. If the monarchy can change its rules overnight, what else can it change? If William can be set aside, what stops George from being set aside as well? And if the line of succession is no longer sacred, what separates monarchy from mere politics? These are not academic questions. They are the very questions history warns us to take seriously. The public senses this weight instinctively, even if they cannot recite the details of past crises. They know, deep down, that the monarchy survives because it feels permanent. That permanence has now been shaken, and history looms as a reminder that once permanence is broken, it is hard to restore. In every pub argument, in every family debate, echoes of past disruptions can be felt. The older generation recalls the abdication crisis. The younger generation wonders if monarchy itself still matters, and in between lies a chasm of uncertainty. That chasm is filled not with answers, but with the heavy silence of history reminding everyone that choices have consequences. And so, as Britain wrestles with Charles's decision, the weight of history presses down on every player in this drama. For Charles, it is the knowledge that kings who defied tradition rarely escaped unscathed. For William, it is the crushing realization that his destiny, long guaranteed by tradition, may vanish in a heartbeat. For Anne, it is the awareness that history often elevates the reluctant, but rarely without cost. And for the people, it is the unsettling reminder that history is not just in the past. It is alive, shaping their future, reminding them that the crown is both fragile and enduring, permanent and vulnerable. The decision made 1 minute ago has not just altered the present. It has awakened the ghosts of centuries, forcing the nation to ask whether it can bear the weight of history pressing against a choice that feels both revolutionary and reckless. The story is no longer about one man's decision. It is about whether the monarchy can carry the burden of its past into a future that no longer respects the inevitability of tradition. To understand why King Charles's decision to name Princess and as his successor stunned the world, one must look closely at the woman herself. Princess and the Princess Royal has always been an anomaly within the Windsor family. She has lived her entire life under the shadow of her mother's reign and her brother's destinies. Yet she has carved out a role uniquely her own: quiet, diligent, unpretentious, and perhaps most importantly, reluctant to embrace the trappings of power. In a family often accused of indulgence and scandal, Anne's existence has been marked by discipline and duty. And that is precisely why Charles's choice to elevate her struck such a chord. It forced the world to look beyond the usual heirs and examine the figure who, for decades, has carried the monarchy on her shoulders without ever demanding recognition. Anne's story is one of paradox. She was born into immense privilege, yet she has lived more like a servant of the monarchy than a beneficiary of it. From her earliest years, she exhibited qualities that set her apart from her siblings. While Charles often seemed sensitive and conflicted, Edward withdrawn, and Andrew reckless, and radiated a bluntness that made her both respected and feared. She did not soften her words for cameras or attempt to charm the public with practiced smiles. Instead, she adopted a straightforward manner that sometimes alienated journalists but earned her the loyalty of those who worked with her. To many who have encountered her, Anne embodies an old-fashioned sense of royal duty. She shows up, she does the work, and she leaves, rarely indulging in drama or spectacle. This reluctance to play the celebrity aspect of royalty is one of her defining characteristics. While Diana captivated the world with glamour, and Meghan Markle drew attention through controversy, and quietly attended hundreds of engagements each year, rarely attracting headlines. She has often been called the hardest-working royal, not as a compliment to her charisma, but as a testament to her relentless schedule. Year after year, she undertook more public duties than any other member of the family, representing Britain abroad, supporting charities, and maintaining connections across the Commonwealth. She rarely sought credit, and she never chased the spotlight. Her life became a pattern of duty without indulgence, discipline without spectacle, and yet, and was not without her share of rebellion. Her younger years carried moments that demonstrated her fiery independence. She was an accomplished equestrian, competing in the 1976 Olympics, a testament to her determination and athletic ability. She also endured moments of public scrutiny, from her relationships to her divorce, but she never allowed scandal to define her. When an attempted kidnapping in 1974 put her life in danger, her response became the stuff of legend. Confronted by a gunman who ordered her out of her car, she famously retorted, "Not bloody likely." That moment encapsulated her spirit, unflinching, direct, and unyielding. Unlike others in her family, she did not crumble under pressure, she defied it. That strength made her admired by those who saw in her a rare kind of courage that seemed rooted not in privilege but in sheer will. Despite her independence, Anne never positioned herself as a rival to the throne. If anything, she distanced herself from it. She accepted the title of Princess Royal but often brushed aside questions about leadership, framing herself as a servant of the crown rather than a contender for it. When asked about her relentless workload, she often downplayed it, saying she was simply doing her duty. Her reluctance to indulge in drama made her a stabilizing force in a family plagued by controversy. Through divorces, affairs, and scandals that battered her siblings, Anne remained steady, even dull in the eyes of some. But dullness, in a monarchy desperate for stability, became its greatest asset. Her personal life further reflects her unusual relationship with royalty. Unlike Charles, who carried the burden of destiny, or Andrew, who embraced the privileges of status and lived with practicality. Her children, Peter Phillips and Zara Tyndall, were not given royal titles at her insistence. She wanted them to live ordinary lives, free from the crushing weight of expectation. That decision alone speaks volumes about her character. She understood the cost of royal life, the scrutiny, and the loss of privacy, and she deliberately chose not to impose that burden on her children. It was an act of defiance against tradition, but one rooted in wisdom and maternal instinct. It also signaled her understanding of the difference between duty and vanity. She fulfilled her duty, but never clung to the perks of royalty. And this is where the paradox deepens. And, who never sought power, is the one Charles has chosen to carry it. Her reluctance becomes her greatest qualification. Where others in the family have been accused of craving the throne, whether William by expectation or Harry by resentment, and stands apart. She never asked for it. never lobbied for it, never positioned herself as a contender. And yet, her decades of steady service have built a resume stronger than any of her siblings. Charles, weary of scandal and wary of instability, may see in the qualities the monarchy desperately needs: resilience, discipline, and the ability to put duty above ego. But one must also consider Anne's own feelings in this drama. The woman who once dismissed royal trappings and who has spent her life in service without indulgence may find the prospect of being successor both burdensome and unwelcome. Her sense of duty may compel her to accept, but her personal inclination may lean toward reluctance. This tension between obligation and desire makes her story deeply human. She is not a figure hungry for power, but one who may feel trapped by it. That reluctance resonates with the public, who see in her a kind of authenticity absent in others. She does not want to rule, and that is precisely why people believe she should. The announcement has forced the public to reevaluate, and in ways they never have before. Suddenly, the woman long considered a supporting player has been thrust to the center of the stage. Her decades of quiet service now look like preparation for leadership. Her bluntness, once criticized, now appears as honesty in a world of polished spin. Her refusal to indulge in spectacle seems like exactly what the monarchy needs to restore dignity. And yet, the irony remains. Anne, who has lived her life avoiding the throne's shadow, is now the one standing directly in it. Looking at Anne's trajectory, it is easy to see why Charles made his choice. He has lived through scandal, both personal and familial. He has watched his son's fracture under the weight of public scrutiny. He has seen the monarchy's reputation battered by missteps and modern skepticism. And through it all, one figure remained unshaken. And the reluctant royal never faltered. She did her duty without complaint, carried the monarchy when others stumbled, and never asked for more. In her, Charles may see not only a successor but a safeguard. A guarantee that the crown will survive not through spectacle or popularity, but through service and resilience. Yet Anne's reluctance cannot be overlooked. To accept the throne, or even the prospect of it, would mean sacrificing the quiet independence she has cultivated. It would mean becoming a symbol, a figure scrutinized in ways she has long avoided. The woman who once refused to give her children titles may now be asked to bear the heaviest title of all. That tension between reluctance and duty will shape not only her personal journey but the monarchy's future. If she accepts with grace, she may restore faith in the institution. If she resists, openly or subtly, she may expose the cracks in Charles's gamble. And story is not just about one woman elevated to unexpected prominence. It is about the values the monarchy chooses to embody. In her, people see humility, hard work, and authenticity. In bypassing his son for his sister, Charles has declared that these qualities matter more than lineage. That message carries immense weight, both inspiring and divisive. For some, it represents progress, a monarchy willing to evolve. For others, it is a betrayal of history, a dangerous precedent that could destabilize the institution. And at the center of it all is Anne, the reluctant royal, who never asked for this role but may now be forced to carry it. The chapter of Anne's life that lies ahead will not only define her legacy, but the monarchy's fate. If she can balance her reluctance with her duty, she may emerge as the monarch Britain never expected but desperately needed. If not, her reluctance may become the monarchy's undoing. Either way, her story, once quiet and overlooked, is now the beating heart of the greatest royal drama of our time. When King Charles named Princess Anne as his official successor, it was more than a decision. It was a declaration that peeled back layers of personal history, long-buried insecurities, and political calculations that only now seem to be surfacing. No choice of this magnitude happens in a vacuum. For Charles, who has spent his entire life in the waiting room of destiny before finally ascending to the throne, the act of selecting his successor was as personal as it was political. To understand why he would bypass his own son and rewrite centuries of expectation, one must look into the hidden motives that may have driven him. Motives woven from fear, loyalty, resentment, and perhaps even love. The first and most obvious motive lies in trust. Charles has endured decades of watching his family buckle under the weight of royal life. He saw his brother Andrew fall from grace, mired in scandal that left a permanent stain on the monarchy. He witnessed Harry's exodus and his relentless criticism of the institution from abroad. Even William, polished and prepared though he is, has not been immune to whispers of impatience, tension with his father, and struggles behind the scenes. Against this backdrop, and stands as the one figure who never wavered. To Charles, trust may outweigh blood. He has no reason to doubt Anne's loyalty, no fear that she will abandon her duty, no suspicion that she will turn the monarchy into a personal platform. If the monarchy is to survive beyond him, Charles may believe it requires someone he trusts absolutely. Another motive may be fear of the fragility of the institution itself. Charles ascended the throne at a time when the monarchy faces unprecedented scrutiny. Public opinion wavers, Republican sentiment grows louder in Commonwealth nations, and scandals continue to chip away at the family's credibility. William, while admired, represents both hope and risk. His modern approach appeals to younger generations, but his willingness to reshape traditions unsettles conservatives. Harry, though far removed, represents chaos, and, by contrast, symbolizes stability. For a man who spent most of his life being doubted, criticized, and mocked as unfit to rule, Charles may fear leaving the monarchy in hands that could gamble with its future. Choosing and may be his way of insulating the crown from risk, ensuring that it endures through loyalty rather than experimentation. But trust and fear are only part of the picture. Resentment, too, may play its role. Charles's relationship with William has always been complicated. As William grew into adulthood, he captured the admiration of the public in ways Charles never could. William's marriage to Catherine reinforced his image as the ideal future king, a modern family man with grace and steadiness. Comparisons between father and son often painted Charles as weak, awkward, and less appealing. For a man who waited decades to ascend the throne, this constant overshadowing may have created deep resentment. By choosing Anne, Charles not only elevates his sister, but also diminishes William. It is a reminder that the father still holds the ultimate power over the son, that destiny is not as secure as William may have believed. It is a statement that says, "You are not untouchable." Personal loyalty may also explain Charles's decision, and has been his ally through countless storms. During his turbulent marriage to Diana, and often defended him privately, resisting the public narrative that cast him as villain. During his long, controversial relationship with Camilla, and never abandoned him. She may not have been outspoken, but her quiet support reinforced Charles's sense of security. In contrast, William's relationship with his father has at times appeared strained, with disagreements about the modernization of the monarchy, the handling of Harry, and the role of Camilla as queen. For Charles, loyalty may matter more than birth order, and in his eyes, and has demonstrated more loyalty than William ever has. There is also the matter of legacy. Charles knows that his reign will be shorter than his mother's. He does not have decades to reshape the monarchy or solidify its future. Every decision he makes carries the weight of legacy, and he may wish to be remembered as the monarch who prioritized service over self-interest. By naming Anne, he frames himself as a reformer who dared to put the crown's survival above tradition. It is a legacy that could inspire admiration or outrage, but it ensures that he will be remembered as more than just a transitional monarch. For a man who spent most of his life mocked as irrelevant, the chance to define his own story may be irresistible. Camilla's influence cannot be ignored either. She has long been one of the most influential figures in Charles's life, shaping his perspectives and decisions behind closed doors. Their marriage, once scorned, has grown into a partnership of mutual dependence. Rumors have circulated for years that Camilla's relationship with William is far from warm. She may see Anne as less of a threat to her place in Charles's legacy and more of a stabilizing figure who would not seek to undo what she and Charles built. If Camilla has whispered in Charles's ear, it may have been to persuade him that Anne's steadiness is safer than William's ambition. In that sense, Anne becomes not just Charles's choice, but Camilla's as well. Beyond personal motives, one must consider the larger cultural moment in which this decision was made. Britain is in flux, grappling with questions of identity, tradition, and change. Charles may see his choice as aligning with broader societal values. Anne's reputation for humility, hard work, and refusal to indulge in privilege resonates with a public weary of royal scandals. By elevating her, Charles aligns the monarchy with the values of service and duty rather than entitlement. It is a gamble that the people will accept disruption of tradition if it is in favor of authenticity. In an age when the monarchy risks irrelevance, Charles may see and as the one figure who embodies the qualities the public still respects. And yet, beneath these explanations lies a deeper, almost primal motive: control. Charles has lived his entire life with little control over his destiny. His mother's reign lasted 7 decades, leaving him waiting longer than any heir in history. His marriage to Diana was arranged more for duty than love, and its collapse spiraled out of his control. His relationship with Camilla was for decades condemned by the press, reducing him to a caricature of scandal. Even as king, he inherits a monarchy shaped by Elizabeth's image, not his own. In naming Anne, Charles finally exerts control over the one area where he still can, the future. It is a moment of assertion, a final act of agency. For once, he is not the man who waits. He is the man who decides. Of course, every motive carries consequences. Trust in and may alienate William. Fear of risk may signal weakness to critics. Resentment may fracture the family irreparably. Loyalty to and may be seen as favoritism. Legacy building may backfire if the decision destabilizes the monarchy. Camilla's influence may fuel further division, and the assertion of control may ultimately cost him respect if it appears petty. Charles's motives, hidden or otherwise, are not without danger. Every thread woven into this choice could unravel into conflict. For the public, the question of Charles's motives is as captivating as the announcement itself. Was he acting as a king, prioritizing the survival of the monarchy, or as a father, driven by complicated emotions toward his children? Was this a rational calculation based on its qualities, or an impulsive act fueled by resentment? The ambiguity fuels speculation, ensuring that the story does not end with the announcement but continues to grow in complexity. At its heart, Charles's decision reveals the tension between tradition and individuality. Monarchs are supposed to embody continuity, yet Charles has inserted his own personality into the very heart of succession. He has blurred the line between personal and institutional, between father and king, between brother and ruler. That blurring is dangerous, for history shows that when monarchs act on personal motives, the crown itself is shaken. But Charles may believe that in an age of skepticism, authenticity demands honesty, even if it disrupts tradition. The hidden motives behind his choice may never be fully known. They may be a mix of fear, trust, resentment, loyalty, legacy, and control. But what is certain is that Charles's decision was not made lightly. It was the product of a lifetime of waiting, of wounds carried, of doubts endured. It was the act of a man who finally seized the chance to shape destiny, even if it meant rewriting history. And in doing so, Charles has ensured that his reign, short though it may be, will never be forgotten. The announcement that his father had named Princess and as his official successor was not merely a headline for Prince William. It was a wound, one that cut deeply into his identity, his family, and his sense of destiny. For William, the throne has never been a distant dream, but a certainty pressed into him since childhood. His life was built on that inevitability, every lesson, every expectation, every sacrifice tailored to the role he was destined to play. In a single minute, that certainty was shattered. For William, the shock was not just political or constitutional, it was profoundly personal. William's upbringing was unlike that of most heirs. From the moment of his birth in 1982, he was presented to the public as the future king, the next chapter of the monarchy. His childhood photographs were not just family keepsakes, but national symbols, reminders that the monarchy had continuity. He was raised under the careful eye of both his parents and his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, who understood that one day he would bear the weight of the crown. While his brother Harry was often described as the spare, William was always the heir. His education, his military service, even his marriage to Catherine were framed within that destiny. He was the anchor of the monarchy's future, the man around whom stability would be built. To have that role stripped away publicly and suddenly must have felt like the ultimate betrayal. Imagine William in the moments after hearing the announcement. Whether he was informed minutes before or discovered it alongside the public is irrelevant. The sting would have been the same. Years of preparation, decades of expectation, an entire life sculpted for one purpose, all undermined by a decision made by his father, the man who above all others was supposed to safeguard that destiny. The emotional impact of that moment cannot be overstated. Betrayal is not too strong a word. It was not merely that Charles had changed the rules. It was that Charles had declared, implicitly if not explicitly, that his son was not fit to succeed him. For William, a man who has devoted his adult life to preparing for the role, such a judgment is nothing less than devastating. The psychological toll of that betrayal must be immense. William has already endured the trauma of his mother's death, an event that shaped not only his personal life, but his public identity. Diana's death thrust him into the spotlight as a grieving son, forced to navigate public mourning while enduring private anguish. He has carried the burden of her legacy ever since, constantly compared to her in ways both flattering and suffocating. To now face rejection from his father in such a monumental way reopens those wounds. It reinforces a narrative that William has spent years resisting, that he is defined not by his own choices, but by the judgments of others. His mother's absence, his father's decision, the monarchy's demands, all weigh heavily upon him. There is also the matter of his children. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis have been raised in the shadow of William's destiny. George, in particular, has been presented as the heir after his father, the image of a monarchy stretching securely into the future. How does William explain to his children that this certainty has been ripped away? How does he tell George that the future he was promised may no longer exist? The burden of that conversation underscores the cruelty of Charles's decision. It is not just William who suffers. It is his entire family, a family that has been used as symbols of continuity and stability. Now that continuity lies in ruins. Public perception of William only deepens the shock. For years, he has been regarded as the stabilizing figure in a fractured monarchy. He is often described as calm, measured, and modern without being radical. His marriage to Catherine has reinforced the image of a family man grounded in responsibility and devotion. He has been a symbol of hope for those who believe the monarchy must evolve to survive. And yet, despite this carefully cultivated image, his father has chosen to bypass him. That contradiction fuels speculation. Does Charles truly doubt William's readiness? Or is this a clash of egos, a father unwilling to yield power to a son who has long overshadowed him? Whatever the truth, the public shock mirrors William's private anguish. People are not merely surprised. They are unsettled, for the man they assumed would be king now stands sidelined. William's silence in the wake of the announcement spoke louder than any words. When he appeared briefly in public, his expression carefully controlled, refusing to answer questions, it only fueled speculation. Silence can be powerful, but in this context, it is also revealing. It suggests a man grappling with emotions too complex to articulate, a man unsure how to balance his duty to the monarchy with his personal sense of betrayal. To lash out publicly would damage the monarchy further, but to remain silent risks appearing complicit. It is a no-win situation, one that underscores the depth of his shock. Behind closed doors, the dynamic between father and son must now be more strained than ever. Their relationship has always carried undertones of tension. Charles, long criticized and often dismissed, has lived much of his life overshadowed by William's popularity. William, in turn, has sought to carve his own path, sometimes clashing with his father's views on tradition and modernization. The decision to name and may have been the culmination of these tensions. For William, it is not just a rejection. It is a humiliation, a public stripping of the role that defined his life. How does he reconcile with his father after such a blow? Does he confront him directly, or retreat into cold formality? Either choice carries consequences, both personal and institutional. The broader implications of William's shock ripple outward. For the monarchy to function, the heir must be seen as legitimate. Charles's decision casts doubt on William's legitimacy, not just in the eyes of the public, but within the institution itself. Advisors, courtiers, and politicians must now navigate the uncertainty of succession. Some may quietly sympathize with William, seeing him as the rightful heir unfairly displaced. Others may shift their loyalty to and interpreting Charles's decision as wisdom. William, once the unquestioned center of the monarchy's future, now finds himself in a precarious position, his authority undermined before he has even ascended. And yet, amidst the shock, there is also the possibility of resilience. William is no stranger to adversity. He has endured loss, scrutiny, and the constant pressure of public expectation. He may channel this betrayal into determination, using it to prove his worth, to demonstrate that he is capable of leadership regardless of his father's doubts. In this sense, the shock could become a crucible, a moment that shapes him into a stronger figure. But it could just as easily break him, fueling bitterness and deepening the divide within the family. Which path he chooses remains uncertain, but the weight of the moment will define him for years to come. The shock also raises questions about Catherine's role in this drama. As William's partner and confidant, she must navigate the delicate balance of supporting her husband while maintaining her own public composure. Her influence on William is profound, and her reaction to Charles's decision will likely shape his response. Together, they have built an image of stability and devotion, but behind palace walls, the strain must be immense. Catherine knows that her children's future is tied to William's destiny, and Charles's decision threatens that future. For her, the betrayal is not only against her husband but against her entire family. Ultimately, William's shock is not just the story of a man betrayed by his father. It is the story of an institution destabilized, of a future once certain now thrown into doubt. His personal anguish mirrors the nation's unease, for if William can be set aside so abruptly, what does that say about the monarchy's stability? The shock lingers not because of the announcement itself, but because of what it represents: the fragility of tradition, the unpredictability of power, and the human cost of royal decisions. In the quiet moments after the announcement, when the cameras were gone and the crowds dispersed, William must have wrestled with the enormity of what had just happened. For decades, he was the heir. Now, in a single minute, he is not. That shock will not fade quickly. It will shape his choices, his relationships, and his legacy. And as the world watches, waiting for him to speak, the silence of his shock echoes louder than any proclamation. It is the silence of a man whose destiny has been rewritten by the very hand that once promised to secure it. If Charles's decision to name Princess and as his successor stunned the world and devastated William, the reverberations that reached Prince Harry were of a different kind altogether. For Harry, the son who stepped away from the monarchy, the announcement was not just another twist in the royal saga. It was an earthquake that redefined his exile, his identity, and his complicated relationship with the family he left behind. The Harry factor in this unfolding drama cannot be ignored, for his absence, his choices, and his grievances hover over the monarchy like a storm cloud that refuses to drift away. Harry has always lived in the strange duality of being both central to and outside of the royal institution. Born as the spare, he was close enough to the throne to matter, but far enough to never quite belong in the same way his brother did. His life was defined by contrast. William, the heir destined for power; Harry, the brother expected to support but never lead. That dynamic created both closeness and rivalry between them, a bond that Diana tried to nurture, but one that the monarchy itself made impossible to balance. In many ways, Harry's struggles with identity, duty, and freedom stem from that early imbalance. And when Charles bypassed William to name, and Harry must have felt both vindicated and humiliated. Vindicated, because the announcement suggested that bloodline alone no longer guaranteed destiny. For years, Harry argued that the monarchy was rigid, outdated, and oppressive. His departure to California with Meghan Markle was framed as an act of rebellion against an institution that valued duty above happiness. By naming and Charles seemed to acknowledge that the old rules no longer applied, that service and loyalty mattered more than mere birth order. To Harry, this could feel like proof that his criticisms were not without merit. If William, the golden heir, could be bypassed, then perhaps the monarchy was finally facing the truth Harry had tried to expose. But humiliation accompanied vindication. For Harry, the announcement was also a reminder that he had made himself irrelevant to the monarchy's future. Had he remained within the family, he might have been positioned as a contender or at least a stabilizing force. Instead, his decision to step away ensured that when the time came to consider succession, he was not even part of the conversation. To see his aunt elevated while he remained in exile must have underscored his distance from the institution he once called home. The monarchy had moved on without him, and that reality carried its own sting. Harry's relationship with Charles complicates this further. Despite their estrangements, Harry has often expressed a desire for reconciliation with his father. Yet Charles's choice to elevate and instead of his sons may feel like a final rejection, not just of William, but of Harry too. For all his criticisms of the monarchy, Harry still carries the scars of seeking his father's approval. To be passed over entirely, to be excluded not only from succession but from relevance, would deepen those scars. It is not just about the throne, which Harry has claimed he never wanted. It is about recognition, about feeling that he matters to his father beyond scandal and criticism. The announcement also reopens the rift between William and Harry. For years, their relationship has been strained, reduced from brotherly closeness to cold estrangement. The decision to name and as successor places them both in unfamiliar territory. William, stripped of his role, may feel betrayed by both his father and, indirectly, by the narrative that Harry helped fuel. Harry, in turn, may feel conflicted, sympathy for his brother's shock, but also a sense of grim satisfaction that William's destiny was not as secure as he believed. This new twist could either drive them further apart or create an unlikely common ground. But given their history, reconciliation seems unlikely. More probable is that the announcement entrenches their bitterness, each viewing the other as part of a system that has failed them both in different ways. The Harry factor extends beyond personal emotions into the realm of public perception. In the media, his name resurfaces immediately whenever the monarchy falters. Commentators question whether Harry predicted this chaos when he left, whether his criticisms of the monarchy weakened it, or whether his absence created the vacuum that made its elevation possible. Some argue that had Harry remained loyal, Charles might have trusted him as a successor instead of bypassing his sons altogether. Others counter that Harry's scandals, his interviews, his memoir, his public criticisms, made him unsuitable long before the announcement. Either way, his shadow looms large over the decision, for without Harry's departure, the family dynamics might have unfolded very differently. For Meghan, the decision carries its own significance. She has long positioned herself as someone who challenged the monarchy's traditions and exposed its flaws. Charles's decision to name and validate some of her arguments, that the institution can change, that tradition is not as sacred as it claims. Yet it also serves as a reminder that she and Harry have no role in this new vision of the monarchy. For a couple who once imagined carving out a modern royal life, the reality that and now embodies the monarchy's future is a bitter pill. Meghan may view the announcement as both confirmation of her critiques and exclusion from the very reform she demanded. The global reaction to Harry in this context is equally important. In America, where he and Meghan have built their new lives, commentators framed the announcement as proof of the dysfunction Harry escaped. Some celebrated that he had freed himself from an institution that betrayed even its favored heir. Others suggested that he had squandered an opportunity to influence the monarchy's evolution. In Britain, reactions were sharper. Many saw Harry as irrelevant, a man who abandoned his post and forfeited any claim to sympathy. For others, his story gained new poignancy, a reminder of a son caught between tradition and personal freedom, now rendered powerless in the face of his father's decision.